And really, it was a final pay-per-view, great pay-per-view card, and usually the flyweights don't really draw well. But after many people, obviously to the COVID, there's not as many sports going on, and MMA has really grown because they were able to go this year. You see these flyweights and the battle that they put on for that belt. I mean, it's they weren't able to draw pay per view cards. Mighty Mouse, right, one of the greatest flyweights. There was a reason why he wasn't on the pay per view cards as a headliner. He'd be on them sometimes, but usually it would be a UFC and Fox or one of those type of shows where it was one of the main. It was on a main Fox card, but it wasn't a pay per view headliner. With these guys, Figueredo and Moreno, it shows that these guys can draw. And you throw some of these other up and coming flyweights in there as well. I think there's a lot to be said about this flyweight division, and to make it as exciting as boxing as the 125ers. I mean, you see Leo Santa Cruz versus Tank Davis, and they were, I think it was at 130, but they were 125ers. These fights make for exciting fights at the boxing level. Now, if you can bring in that same type of energy to MMA, they're just going to be a bigger and bigger draw in a division that was potentially going to go away. I mean, it was ready to be axed. So Hudo saved it. Figueredo kind of putting it back on the map as well. So he can thank Cejudo for that, or else he'd be fighting the bigger guys at 35. Last, Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. Crazy that these guys are in their 50s battling out. What do you think about the fight? Who do you think won? Most people thought Tyson won. I think it was purposely meant to be a draw, right? You had one judge calling it a draw, one judge going for Tyson, one for Roy Jones Jr., the celebrity judges. I mean, they don't want one guy to be mad over another guy. So that's the reason why I think they had it. Should these guys be getting in there? That's their prerogative to get in there, to be taking these blows to the head. And Mike Tyson was throwing some leather. So for Roy Jones to be taking these shots, it showed a lot. And Tyson seemed like he was in great shape. Cardio wise, it seemed like he could go another few rounds. I was a little surprised. I thought Roy would have a little bit more attrition as the rounds went on. He would have more energy. But I think, as he said, a lot of those body shots took a toll on him. Also, Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson. I mean, that's what happens when you have someone that's training for a year versus someone that's trained for 6 months to fight. And actually, Jake Paul getting some good sparring, taking it seriously. Good to see that Nate Robinson was able to bounce back from that. But that's the reason why basketball players play basketball and they don't end up with a head damage when they get older. They have the bad knees, the bad joints. They don't get that same type of trauma boxers do because they're doing something completely different. They're trying to score basketball. The ball's trying to go in the hoop, not trying to bounce their head like a basketball off the ground. Much different. I'm glad that Nate was able to get up. Wonder who Jake's going to go up next. Be interesting to see. And last, Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather. This is crazy, right? Crazy. Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather. How? When? How does this happen? I mean, that's what happens when someone's a draw. I mean, a YouTube star versus an actual one of the greatest boxers of all time, one of the greatest defensive boxers of all time, if not the greatest defensive boxer of all time in Floyd Mayweather. I wouldn't say he's the greatest boxer, but defensively, and obviously a huge draw. Probably made more money than anybody else in boxing. And to see him go against a YouTuber, I mean, first it was McGregor, an MMA guy, and which they did ridiculous numbers, and now it's Logan Paul. I really wish we would have seen Floyd against Sugar Shane Mosley in Mosley's prime. He fought him after the fact, or seen him against De La Hoya in his prime, or seen Pacquiao in his prime, or Miguel Cotto in his prime. We never got to see Mayweather in his prime versus one of these guys in their prime. Now we're gonna see Mayweather. He's not in his prime, but he's fighting a YouTuber. He's fighting a YouTuber. Logan Paul is, even though he's bigger and has probably about 50 pounds on Floyd, as I don't want to say a zero chance. It's close to zero, less than 1% chance to beating Floyd. I mean, if it was MMA, it'd be a different story. Use some wrestling, take him down, some grappling. Boxing against Floyd Mayweather, it's not even going to be close. I mean, Floyd will probably keep it close. He'll let them engage and keep it close, but don't look for anything else but just pure entertainment from Floyd and Logan Paul.